Fighter Talk with Chris Rook. Hello, ladies and gentlemen and lovely listeners. Today on your show, we have an incredible story of heroism and quick thinking. He doesn't want to be called a hero, but frankly, he is. He came eye to eye with a killer and decided he did not want to die. Joe Lozito risked his life to help police stop a man who was accused of killing 4 people, an incident that terrorized New York City. Joe Lozito, welcome to our show. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, Chris. Doing real well. Thanks for having me.
No problem, no problem. Now, I just want to start off. I know you've told this story many, many times before, but if you wouldn't mind taking us back to that horrific day and, sort of giving us some insight on what happened again for all the listeners we have right now.
Sure. It was February 12th. It was 2011. It was a Saturday morning. I was on my way to work. At the time, I was living in Philadelphia, and that trip for me one way was pretty much 2.5 hours one way. So I'm doing 5 hours round trip every day. And the bulk of my commute was done. I used to drive from Philly into New Jersey and take New Jersey Transit from Hamilton Station to Penn Station in New York and jump on the subway. So the reality is 98% of my commute that day had been done. Well, unfortunately, I still had the other 2%. And in New York, I'm assuming most other big cities, you have a subway system underground. And at Penn Station, there are many different trains that run there. The line that I take is the 1 train. And the 1 train is the local train, and the 2 and the 3 are the express trains. And that day when I went, I was walking to the platform for the 1. There were notifications that the 1 train had construction on the tracks. So the 1 train route was now going to mimic the 2 and the 3. So basically everything was running express. And the only difference is the 1 platform is the track where only 1 train runs on it. So I said, well, I can get to work quicker if I go to the other platform because double the trains run on that one. This is something that has probably happened 5 times in the 3 years I've worked at this job. Never before had I switched platforms, and since then I haven't switched platforms. But for whatever reason that day, I thought it might be a good idea to try to get to work quicker, and I went to the other platform. So first train that showed up was the 3 train. I got on the train, and alongside with 2 uniformed and armed police officers, New York City police officers, and I always go to the front of the train, and they likewise went to the front of the train, and I just go and I take a seat, and it was a little odd that the police officers, normally when in New York, when police officers go station to station, they'll just stay in the middle of the car. They don't go in with the driver. This particular day, they went in with the driver, and their radios were going pretty crazy. There was a lot of talk on the radio. I didn't know what was going on, but so be it. A couple of minutes from now, I'll be at work, no problem. Well, we don't leave right away, and I thought that was a little weird, but the doors close eventually. We start moving, but we're moving very slow, very suspicious. I have no idea what's going on. With that, this gentleman is relative in this case, but this man walks up and very dirty, filthy, bangs on the door to the engineer's compartment, where not only the engineer is, but now the 2 police officers are. He bangs on the door, and there's a window in the door. He looks through the window, and he says, "Let me in. I'm the police." And with that, the police officers on the other side of the door, looking through the window, look at him and say, "Well, you're not the police." And with that, without incident, the man turns around and walks away. He walks to the center of the car. As soon as that man walks away, there was a man standing next to me. Now he goes to the door, and now he's tapping on the window furiously, tapping and looking over his shoulder and waving for the police to come out, tapping, waving. They still don't come out. And this second man, he keeps looking over his shoulder at the first guy. Now I'm going, what the hell's going on? I have no idea what's going on, but something's up. And as the first gentleman turned around and started making his way back up towards the door, this second man at the door hightailed it right back next to me. So now I'm on full alert, what's going on. So as the first gentleman returned towards the front, he stops about 2 feet from the door, about 3 feet from me, looks me in the eye, takes out a knife, a big 8-inch cooking knife, looks me in the eye and says, you're going to die, you're going to die. And with that, he plunged the knife into my left cheek. As he brought his arm back to strike me again, I figured at this point I could do one of two things. I can let this guy kill me and just turtle and just be a pincushion, or I could actually try to fight back and take my chances, and that's what I did. He recoiled his arm back to strike me again, and with that I attempted the worst single-leg takedown attempt in the history of mankind. And what happened was when I was going to shoot him for his legs, I actually shot too high, and I ended up around his waist. I was able to take him down, but what happened was I gave him pretty much free rein to the back of my head, and he proceeded to stab me 3 more times in the head, and right now we have 4 wounds. So I take him down. He still has control of the knife. I'm on top of him in the dominant position. He's below me, and he's trying to slice up at me with the knife, and I'm trying to catch his wrist. So he slices up the first time, and he slices me in the thumb down to my tendon. He slices up the second time, and he gets me in my tricep muscle. Finally, the third time when he went to stab me, I caught his wrist. I slammed his wrist down. He dropped the knife. And at that point, and only at that point, did the officers emerge from where they were in the motorman's compartment. The male officer, who coincidentally was a larger man than I am, taps me on the back and says, "You can get up now, we got him." And with that, I got up, I sat on a subway seat, and I proceeded to watch my life bleed out of me for about 20-25 minutes with only one person, Alfred Douglas, helping me. So basically, I'm sitting there, and I'm bleeding, and I'm begging the police to get the train moving. We're in the middle of the tunnel, so it's not like we could just open the doors. I can't get off at any stop right now. We're sitting there, and I'm just bleeding to death, and I'm begging the police to get this train moving. So much so as grabbing an officer and asking if they had kids, and they told me yes, and I said, "I have 2 sons." I said, "You have to get me off this train. I can't die on this train. They need me." And I was assured that the paramedics were on their way, and that they were going to get the train moving. A few minutes later, grab another cop by the wrist, and I said, "Hey, are you married?" I was told yes, and I said, "So am I." I said, "My wife needs me. I'm bleeding to death on this train. Let's get this train moving." And obviously at the time I'm not speaking as calm as I am now. I'm in a panic. At that point the officer told me to just keep looking at the back of the train, because the paramedics were on their way and they were coming from the back of the train. More minutes walk by, tick by, and still sitting there bleeding to death, and thankfully a Good Samaritan, who actually helped the male cop handcuff this idiot, came over and held his hand, his bare hand, to my biggest wound on the back of my head, and stood there and berated the other passengers for not helping me, basically yelling at them, saying, "You're going to watch a man die in front of your eyes. How can nobody help this guy? You know, how could you live with yourselves?" and things like that. And another passenger came and gave him some paper towels or napkins. He used that to stem the bleeding. Still, now we're going on 20-25 minutes of me bleeding out and sitting in a puddle of my own blood. Police offering me no assistance, no reassurance of anything. And finally, I hear a cop say, "All right, we're on the move, let's go." And I said, "Wait a second, hold on, what are you talking about? I thought the paramedics were on their way." And they said, no, they're at 42nd Street, they're waiting for you there. So I said, okay. So we get moving. 42nd Street was probably 45 seconds to a minute away. We get to 42nd Street, I see the paramedics right there. Now the doors won't open. Takes a few seconds for the doors to open, and paramedics come rushing in. They go to lift me off of the seat and put me on the stretcher, and at this point I pass out. What I found out later was I passed out with my eyes open, and the police officers thought I was dead. I felt like I snapped right out of it. It kind of felt like when you fall asleep watching TV and you wake right up. And once I woke up, that was the first time I'd actually felt any pain. Basically, I've said this a million times, it felt like if someone doused your head in gasoline and then lit a match. I mean, it was the absolute worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And that is when it really, that was like, I don't even know how to describe it. It was just insane. And I was brought upstairs, was put in the ambulance. The paramedics did an amazing job. I just begged them. I said, please keep talking to me. I don't want to die. I don't want to black out. Just talk to me about anything. I don't care. I begged them for painkillers. They said that once we got to the hospital. They had a morphine drip waiting for me, and they were 100% correct. Thankfully, it was a Saturday morning, and we didn't hit a lot of traffic, and we get to the hospital. And they wheel me in, and it seemed like there were 20 to 30 people waiting for me, and doctors, nurses, everybody. I don't know who all the people were. I guess they were all doctors and nurses and medical staff, and they wheel me in. They start cutting off my clothes to make sure that I'm not cut anywhere else, and hook me up to the morphine. And next thing I know, there's a police officer at the head of my bed, and he holds up a mugshot, and he says, "Is this the guy that did this to you?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Well, you're a hero." And I said, "Well, I'm not a hero. Why am I a hero?" And he said, "Well, he killed 4 people last night." And that was kind of like even now when I say it, I get goosebumps, because I had no idea what this idiot had done the night before. And he told me he was going to kill me. He told me I was going to die, and he tried to do that. But when you hear that he had done it to others the night before, and then when you find out later on that 3 of them were people he actually had a relationship with, that he actually knew, then it kind of really hits in and it sinks in. So that was the proverbial slow motion moment. Like, I couldn't believe it. So I call my family. Most of my family lives in New York, so I call them, and they rush to the hospital. And now I have to call my wife, and my wife is in Philadelphia with my kids, and she's at work. And I call her. I get her voicemail. I send her a text, and just as she's texting me back, I try calling her again. I get her on the phone, and I said, "Listen, I'm at the hospital. I was attacked on the train." And she's, I'm a goofball when it comes to stuff like that. I'm not, I say stupid things sometimes, kidding around. And she's like, "No, you're not." And I said, "No, listen, I said I am." And she's like, "Cut the shit. You're not, And I said, "Listen," I said, just give me 1 second. I said, "Honestly, just take a breath." I said, "I am at Bellevue Hospital. I was attacked by a guy on a train with a knife, but I'm okay." And on the other end of the phone, I could basically just hear and feel the life suck out of her. And she started screaming, and I heard her coworkers come in to try to calm her down. And basically, I said, "Listen, the detectives are going to call you. They're going to give you all the details." I said, "Everyone's on their way. Just get up here as quick as you can." And basically, after that, they proceeded to stitch me up, staple me up, and 7 wounds later, here I am. So.
Wow. And like I said, I've heard that. I've heard the story be told on all the things I've watched, ABC and Fox News. But hearing it just straight from you just totally really puts it in perspective on how crazy it was. Because I told some of my friends that I was doing this interview and showed them the video, and I obviously asked my peers and my friends, what would you ask? And they said, what did it feel like? And obviously that's the number one question that most people would think. And like you said, it's like lighting a match and dousing your head in gasoline and lighting it on fire, which is insane. Now, I have to ask you, being in New York on the subway, you see your fair share of crazy people. It's just sort of common knowledge that there's people singing show tunes or, just being frankly weird. When you initially saw this guy, did you have uneasy feelings?
I got to be honest with you. Part of it was, the reality is he could have been a cop, because he could have been an undercover cop. Because if you think about it, like all the stuff you've seen on TV and these cops that, they pose as, say, homeless people, or, female cops may be posing as prostitutes to try to, get, arrest people or get, entrap people, this and that. So the reality is, the way he was dressed, he really could have been a cop posing as a homeless person. So when he first said he was a cop, I didn't raise a red flag, because I'm thinking, all right, maybe he is. And at the time, I have no idea there's this manhunt going on for this guy. So it could have just been, this guy's a cop, he's on the subway, he saw those 2 go in there, and he was trying to get their attention. When the cop said, "You're not a cop," then it kind of raised a little bit of a red flag. So it definitely had my radar up after that.
Now, of course, you had your radar up. Now, you were able to protect yourself and keep him at bay so he didn't attack anyone else. Now, I'm going to be honest here. Most people, when they get hurt or something happens to them, they're in shock and they don't really have the mindset to do anything. But you were stabbed repeatedly and still had the intelligence to hold this man down and tackle him before he could hurt anybody else. I have to ask you, like, how did you get the strength to do that? And you weren't just like, oh, I just got stabbed and go into shock, but you jumped on the man instead to make sure he wouldn't hurt anybody else and pretty much did what the cops were supposed to do. So I just want to get inside your head and think, what was going through your head? As in, like, oh, okay, I just got stabbed, now it's time to save everybody else.
Well, it's funny you say intelligence because I think some people might argue it was stupidity, but no, you know what? It was, I've done a lot of research on this, and psychology kind of interests me. It always has. I think I get that from my mother. There is a thing called fight or flight, and I think at that time it was just primal, to be honest with you. I don't, look, we're all human beings, but we all have an animal side and we all have a primal side, and I think what separates people like you and I from people like Max and Gelman is that we're in control of that side, but it's still there. You can, and I think at that point it was just, I didn't want to die. I wanted to see my family. I wanted to see my kids. I wanted to see my wife. And it was just kind of like the animal side took over. And, it's just, like I said, I didn't want to die. This guy meant business. And, maybe he thought that I was going to be like the others and be passive. And I'm not criticizing them at all. I mean, Jesus, I don't want it to come across that way. But maybe he took them by surprise. Two of them were women. One of them was an older gentleman. That he stabbed to death. So I don't want it to come across that way. And I don't know, maybe he just thought that I was going to cower in fear or I was going to just be his next victim, and that just was not going to happen. He could have killed me. He had plenty of opportunities to kill me. Like I said, when I took him down, if he would have severed my spinal cord, I would have been a sitting duck. But the fact is, I was not going out that way, and I was gonna fight for my life, and he wasn't going to hurt anybody else, and that was it. And I didn't really have a master plan. It was really just don't die, and that's really what it was. And it was just you fight an animal by being an animal, and I think that was just the side that he tapped.
Yeah, that's exactly. You said you have to fight like an animal to beat an animal. Now, in your story, like we talked about before, after you got stabbed and you did jump on this man, and after he was apprehended and you got back up, it seemed like there was a pretty long waiting period where you were bleeding out.
Yeah.
There was no urgency to stop the train or to get it going to get you out as soon as possible, because I can only imagine how much blood there was on this train coming from you. Like you said, your life was bleeding out of you. There was no urgency or any, I guess the only word is urgency from anyone to get you off that train as soon as possible and get you the help that you needed.
No, there was urgency basically by one person, and that was me. I'm imagining, now I can't speak for the police, but I guess in police work the most important thing is to get the bad guy. Now I had just done that for them. And now, if I die, it doesn't matter because they have the bad guy. And they can, the first day that everything happened, the heroes in the story were the police. It was, there was a press conference, and the Mayor Michael Bloomberg, and the police commissioner, Raymond Kelly, basically went on stage, on a podium, and thanked the heroic actions of two on-duty New York City police officers and an off-duty officer. Made no mention of me other than that I was a victim.
Huh.
So, and I don't need acknowledgement from them.
Yeah, it's not really about acknowledgement, though.
No,
you're
right.
all.
But you know what? Tell the truth.
Yeah.
And what happens is, if I die in that case, I'm just another victim. It's no sweat off the city's ass. I am just another guy that got killed, but the bad guy is captured. And then if I die, nobody challenges their story because their whole story was. This happened on a Saturday. So Saturday's internet and Sunday's print editions of the newspapers were basically just telling the story that the police put out there. Was, these cops are heroes. And even the off-duty cop, he was off-duty. He was still a hero too. Well, that was quite in contrast to the actual truth that came out in Sunday's internet stories and Monday's print editions, which was the truth. But no, in answer to your earlier question, no, the only person, and Alfred Douglas too. I mean, he's the one that calmed me down, and I'm sure he wanted me off that train. But the reality is the people that were there that day to catch a spree-killing, police impersonating fugitive. I did their job that day, and they honestly couldn't care less if I got off that train dead or alive. Neither one of them acknowledged me on the train and offered me any kind of assistance, offered me any kind of encouragement, did nothing. So no, the only person that had any sense of urgency that day was me.
That's it's not good. That is not the way things are supposed to be. Now, in most movies you see, and obviously it's a very cliche thing, when something happens to you that's a near-death experience or something very serious happens, there's the quote that your life flashes before your eyes. When this man was attacking you, and when he was finished attacking you and you had that time period when you were in shock and bleeding out, what was going through your head?
You mean besides the knife?
Besides the knife.
My family, man. I mean, it like you talk about cliches, but I'll preface this by saying I'm a very boring person. I lead a very boring life. It has nothing to do with my age. When I was your age, I was boring. I'm a very simple man, and from the beginning of my day to the end of my day, the only thing that matters to me is my family. So I didn't see my life pass in front of my eyes that day, but I saw my family, and that was it. That's why I fought, because I got two great kids, I got a great wife, and I wasn't going to die that day, and if I was going to die fighting. And I think people that know me, they know this, and people that don't know me, it might sound hokey or whatever, but that's it, man. I saw my kids, I saw my wife, and my family. Everyone means something to me, and that's it. So, I was going to live to see my kids graduate college and get married and be a grandfather. It's really that simple.
Yeah, that's what most people think about, is obviously the people that you care about. Now, what are your thoughts on the transit security and police and how they handled the situation?
Well,
I'm opening Pandora's box, aren't I?
Well, you said handled, so I handled actually implied they got involved. We're actually currently involved in a lawsuit against the city of New York and their police department. I feel like it was, had they done anything that day, nobody had to get hurt. I can't really speak too much about it. There is a video on YouTube right now which pretty much details everything. But I say this, if you read the comments after the video, a lot of them are anti-cop, and I have no issue. People are going to feel how they want to feel. I am actually pro-cop. My sister is a police officer in the city of New York. My wife has several relatives who are police officers, either here on Long Island or in the city, and maybe I'm naive, but I think there are plenty of officers around the world that want to do the right thing. I think there are a lot of people who get into the line of work to actually make a difference, and I know that there are, and the fact is, that day on that train, I didn't have either one of those officers on the train. Neither one of them honestly cared about me, cared about anyone else in that train. They did nothing, and let me play devil's advocate for a second. If they don't come out and get this guy, and he doesn't attack me, and the train pulls into the next stop, that's 42nd Street. That's one of the busiest streets in the world. This guy decides to get off this train and go up to 42nd Street. There's no telling what he does. Okay? There are so many possibilities that could have happened if he doesn't attack me. All right? He goes to 42nd Street. It's early in the morning on a Saturday. There's people there, people with families, things like that, and these two people, they see him through a window. They're on the train specifically to catch him, and they decide not to. And, it's disgusting. So, I mean, basically, right now, I'm arguing that I should have an opportunity to have my day in court. The city is arguing that the police, if you can believe this, have no obligation to protect anybody.
Wow.
And that's their argument.
Huh.
In their argument, in their motion to dismiss, they cited several cases, none of which are similar to my case at all. But it's very it and you read it and you go and you don't think, wait a second, they have a point, but then you go, well, wait a second, none of these cases are like mine. So we've both presented our sides to a judge, and I'm waiting to hear right now. And the reality is, one man is going to decide if I'm going to have my day in court, and if he decides that no, I don't have a legal leg to stand on, and I have no right to sue the city of New York for what the police didn't do, then I'm dead in the water. And if he decides that we're able to go forward with this lawsuit, then I'm salivating, man, because I want to get these guys in court, and I want them to be questioned, and I want to know what they were thinking and why they didn't do a goddamn thing that day.
Yeah, that would be. I think there's a lot of people would want to know that because they are supposed to serve and protect. That's
not. You know what? Not according to the law, believe it or not. If you Google that, it's really sad. But
wow.
They don't have to do a damn thing. They can. The reality is they can sit back and watch a person get attacked. They can sit back and watch a woman get raped. They can sit back and watch anything, and they don't have to do anything. And
wow.
You know what? Not all cops are like that.
Nope.
Like I said, there are great cops out there, and there are great cops that would get involved, and great cops that would stop something before it starts. And I'm sure that day, whenever they had their meeting and they give out that mugshot, because I'm sure if the cop at the hospital had the mugshot, I'm sure these two guys had the mugshot too. And I'm sure there were cops, as soon as that guy knocks on the door and says, "I'm the police," and they look through the window, they would go, "Holy shit, this is the guy we're supposed to catch."
Yeah, exactly.
And they do something. So there are plenty of good cops out there. Two of them were not on my train that day. And, what I hope and I pray every day that I have my day in court. I think it could be a landmark case. So we'll see what happens.
I hope you do as well. Now, sticking with the court side of things, there were reports that said there were obviously two different trials set up for Max Gelman. But in the one trial that you were there, he had some pretty heinous things to say to you that we obviously could not repeat on this show. But for everybody listening, it was not very nice, and it was very rude. Now, are you happy with his sentence, or do you believe he deserves more?
Well, I'm not happy with his sentence because I am pro-death penalty, and let me qualify that. There are many cases of people on death row where there's questions, and in my opinion, if there's even a shadow of a doubt, I don't think you can use the death penalty. I don't. If there's even a grain of sand's amount, shadow of a doubt, you can't go forth. But in a case like this where it's cut and dry, this guy did it, and you catch him in the act, he did it. There's no reason why any of our tax dollars here in the state of New York should be keeping this guy alive. We had a guy years ago, if you Google him, his name is Colin Ferguson.
Mm-hmm.
He's another imbecile that woke up on the wrong side of the bed that day and started shooting people on Long Island Railroad. And when they called him, I mean, it was cut and dry. This is the guy that just killed a lot of people. Why does he get due process? Why? I can't really go into what I think should happen to him, but my tax dollars are helping him, or helping to keep him alive, just like they're helping to keep Max and Gelman alive.
Yeah.
No, I mean, if you're not gonna do the right thing, and draw and quarter this guy in the middle of New York City so everyone can see it, then he's in jail for 225 years, and he deserves it. I'm sorry, I've been maybe saying some curse words here, and maybe I shouldn't have, and I apologize for that. I
absolutely.
get emotional, but,
don't even worry about it.
I'll go so far as to say I hope he gets raped in jail every day.
Yeah.
And I wait for the day I get the phone call that he hung himself in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And if that makes me vicious or less of a human being, then so be it. But
absolutely not.
I want that to happen. The day in court that you're referring to was actually his sentencing. And basically what happened was, what maybe people outside of New York may not realize is, everything that he did took place in one of the boroughs called Brooklyn, where he was living.
Okay.
My incident took place in the city of Manhattan.
Yeah.
So he had two different sentencing moments, whatever the correct word is for that.
Mm-hmm.
In the first one, it was for everything that happened in Brooklyn, which were the attacks on some people, the 4 murders. And he basically got 50 years per murder, which to me it doesn't seem like enough. But You know, because if he murders one person and he gets 50 years, now he's going to get out, or potentially get out when he's 70. And not that he's going to do anything then, but why should he ever see the light of day again?
Exactly.
But when you add them all up, you got 200 years. And basically that day, any of the families of the people he killed were allowed to make a victim statement and an impact statement. And when they did, he was, you know, very callous, very, you know, rude, and just being himself. I don't think he knows any other way, but... and I think, you know, these were people that wanted to basically, you know, just tell him, you know, what you did and how you've changed all our lives, and he honestly didn't give a shit. So, and he was very rude, and I read the stuff in the paper, and I said, well, that's not going to happen with me. I basically, in my head, I got the letter in the mail, basically saying he's going to be sentenced on such and such a date, and if you'd like to make an impact statement, you know, from the DA, call me in, and you will be allowed to. And I was frothing at the mouth. And basically what I did from the time I got the notice till the time of the sentencing, I played the whole scene in my head a million times. You know, there was no way that that guy was going to say anything to me that I hadn't thought of already. I mean, I think, I would imagine his intelligence has a ceiling. It's not a very high ceiling. And I'm not a genius by any stretch, but I'd argue that I'm probably slightly more intelligent than him. And when I said that, slightly was in quotes. But there was nothing he was going to say to me that day that I hadn't thought of already. And it played out exactly like I thought. I actually had answers in the holster. You know, I had the bullets in the chamber ready to answer everything that he was going to say, and it played out everything. I mean, it couldn't have played out any better. I knew what he was going to say. And he said it, and I had the answers ready to go. So, and it was great. Honestly, I left there, and it was exhilarating, and it was very therapeutic to be in the same room with him again. Unfortunately, we were maybe 30, 40 feet away from each other, and there were 5 called officers in between us. But it was wonderful to be able to watch him, you know, go do the perp walk again, and you know, it was like I said, therapeutic is the word. It was really, it was great. It was like getting a monkey off my back. I was able to tell him exactly what a lowlife he was, and I was able to read the names of the victims again, so he can hear their names again. And you know, I mean, he's just a lowlife, and he's where he belongs right now. And you know, I'm out and I'm enjoying life, and you know, unfortunately, my tax dollars are paying to feed him. And you know, I don't know if he reads, but, you know, let him read books and work out and everything. But, you know, I believe in karma, so hopefully that won't be for too much longer.
Yeah, now, just to quickly revisit the death penalty thing, I am also pro-death penalty if the crime fits the punishment. But here's a thought that I have. Is death almost too easy for some people? And isn't it better that they rot in a cell and only see 1 hour of daylight per day than just dying? Because when you hear stuff like murder-suicides, the general consensus is, well, he got off too easy or she got off too easy.
The difference isn't a murder-suicide. That was the murderer's choice.
Yeah.
Kill themselves. This, you know, and yeah, I agree. Look, if jail is as awful as it's made out to be, then yeah, let him rot. My thing is, okay, when he's dead, he's dead. In jail, is he going to escape? Probably not. But could he? You never know.
Yeah.
And if he escapes, I'm not worried about him coming after me, but does he hurt other people? You know, he's alive in jail. Does he hurt any of the corrections officers? You know what I'm saying?
There's just too many variables.
There's a lot of opportunity
Mm-hmm.
for more bad stuff to happen with him being alive. Now, again, is it going to happen? Probably not. But what were the chances of me being attacked on the train that day? You know, so there's always a chance. And if he's ashes and dust, then nothing can happen.
Yeah, so, exactly.
You know, and you know he's alive. So now, does he get visitors? Why should he be allowed to see his family when the people that he murdered will never be able to see their family again?
Very true.
You know, so there's many different variables that play into it. And to me, in a case like this, where it's cut and dry, he killed 4 people, he attacked 4 or 5 other people. Why? Just get rid of him. He's never going to be rehabilitated. He has no hope of ever getting out legally ever again. Let's just end it.
Yeah.
End it.
That's also very true.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to switch here and think about this side of things, more of the psychology side. So this incident, how has it changed the way that you deal with people in your everyday life and the communities? Because you've seen the ugliest of ugly sides of people and what they are capable of doing. So when you walk around during the day and you are in New York and there's so many people there, how do you deal with, I guess, more sketchy people that you see? Are you afraid, or do you approach it differently, or how do you deal with that?
Um, there's probably two versions of me. There's a version that when I'm at home with my family and when I'm doing things around people that I have a comfort level with, I'm myself. You know, I like to talk to people. I like to make people smile. I like to make people happy because you know what? I woke up today, so today's a good day because the reality is I should be dead.
Yeah.
And you know, every day I wake up, it's an opportunity to do something that day. Whether it's just go to the gym, spend time with my kids, you know, go watch them do jujitsu, take them to a hockey game or a baseball game or whatever, you know, play Connect Four, you know, play video games with my kids, take my wife out to a movie or dinner or something. I have an opportunity to do something that day to make a difference in somebody's life, you know, and even if it's my own, you know, I have an opportunity to make that day awesome. So when I'm in my comfort zone or if I'm around people I care about, that's the real me. When I'm in the city and I go to work, I'm very guarded. You know, I do things like I never did before. Utilizing windows, like the reflections on windows to look behind me, look side of me. Like I was never a very trusting person around strangers to begin with, and this just kind of solidified that.
Yeah.
So I don't like crowds, and I never did. I mean, I don't like crowds, but that hasn't changed, and I think I'm just, and I don't even want to say I'm a little more careful because I always think I was. You know, I think it was just a situation that happened. So, you know, the one thing that I will say is, you know, like you said, I saw the ugliest. Look, I always say I stood face to face with the devil that day, and you know, but in the weeks and the months that happened after that, I saw the real good in a lot of people, and that kind of reaffirmed my belief that there are some real good people out there. You know, it's just you know, like everything else. You know, you got bad apples and you got some real good people out there, and I saw, you know, my wife and I were shown a lot of love by a lot of people, and you know, that really just. You know, I've always said this. You know, this guy doesn't take up any space in my head. You know, I don't really talk about him that much. When you know, an interview like this, obviously I'm going to open up about it,
Of course.
and I'm going to talk about him. But in my everyday life, this guy doesn't occupy any space in my head. If I give him any kind of thought or any kind of space or any kind of, you know, whatever, then that means I'm not thinking about my kids and I'm not thinking about my wife or I'm not thinking about MMA, or I'm not thinking about spring training right now, or I'm not thinking about stuff that makes it, or going to the gym, or you know, stuff that makes me happy. You know, if I'm thinking about this guy, there's so many other things I could be thinking about, and I'm really depriving myself by giving this guy any space in my head, any more space than it has to be. So, you know, it's changed me in that way. Where I think I probably had the tack of a lot of people where something doesn't go your way, maybe you dwell on it a little bit, and you know, maybe ruins your disposition for the day or your demeanor. And nowadays, it's kind of like, hey man, if I can't change it, I'm not going to worry about it, you know, and just try to always be positive, you know. So it might have changed me that way, but overall, I don't think it's really changed me that much, other than the fact that, you know, I do things like I said, like utilizing mirrors and utilizing windows and, you know, just kind of scanning everything maybe a second time as opposed to a first time, you know, and, you know, but, you know, and, I mean, aside from the psychological stuff, which is almost like a personal thing, but, no, it hasn't changed me a whole lot on the outside.
Okay. Now, how did your kids deal with this situation? Did it hurt them? Well, obviously it hurt them emotionally, but the way that you teach them how to deal with people, because you must be, of course, always worrying about your kids like every parent is. But how did you explain this situation to him, or them, sorry, and, you know, how did you just basically, it's a very adult situation,
Yeah.
and it's like, how did you tell them?
Well, basically, you know, I'm very fortunate. I'm going to sound like every other parent. I have great kids, and I have very bright kids. And my wife and I have always tried to be honest with them. And, we didn't want to we really wanted to keep that going here. And basically, I figured that the worst thing was going to be when they first saw me, when they drove up to New York and they walked in the room. I'm sure it was probably traumatic for them. Fortunately or unfortunately, most of the wounds are to the back of my head. So when they walked in, I mean, my left eye was black, purple, black, everything, had blood on the eyeball. I had the stitches on the side of my face. But when they're face-to-face with me that day, they couldn't really see the mess that was the back of my head. And I think that helped a little bit. But, as time goes on, they see it, and they, all of a sudden their dad, and I always had my head shaved, so it wasn't anything new. But now their dad has their head shaved with staples in their head, and this is stuff, a stapler that they use for school, and
Yeah.
now all of a sudden, their dad has staples in their head, and he's got a, busted up eye, and, and he can't, grab a gallon of milk with his left hand, and all this other stuff. And, the bottom line was this: it basically it gave me the opportunity to maybe have the talk with them earlier than I normally would. And it was really this simple as, look, there are some bad people out there. And there are some people out there that, don't know how to act, really. They don't know how to behave. They don't know how to act. They're jealous if you're happy. They're jealous if you're smarter than them. They're jealous if you're better looking than them, which obviously has never been a problem for me. But, they're just people out there who are trying to bring you down. And some people might do it with words, and some people might do it with their actions. But, they need to know that, there are good guys and bad guys, and it's not just in comic books, and it's not just in video games, and that, the chances of something like this happening to any individual, when you think about the number of people on the planet, it's really slim. But there's always a possibility, and, they were going to, unfortunately they had to experience it. I'm very happy that it wasn't them personally experiencing it at any age, and I'm glad it was me. But, the bottom line was, look, kids, this can happen to you. It probably won't. There are bad guys out there. Just live your life the right way, and just worry about yourself. And, you will be able to defend yourself. They're both taking jiu-jitsu right now at one of Matt Serra's academies. And, and I told him, I'm not sending you there because I want you to be a UFC champion. I'm not sending you there so you win gold medals in the Olympics. I don't care how far you go with this. You'll go as far as you want to go. But if someone messes with you, I want you to take their arm home. It's that simple. And my message to them has always been the same. I don't ever want to get a call from the principal saying you started a fight. But if I get a call from the principal saying you finished the fight, I'll worry about school. I'll handle that. You finish what other people start. I have no problem with that. And that has always been our message, and even more so now. So, like I said, my kids are bright, and my kids think I'm a hero, which means the world to me.
As they should.
Well, I appreciate that, but my kids are, they look at me, I'm just dad. I'm just dad. I did to them, I did a cool thing. It's kind of like, well, my dad is this, and well, my dad stopped a killer. It's kind of like that. So, I mean, they have that, I guess, but, I try to keep my kids very grounded, and, and they know they can ask me anything about it, and I'll just be honest with them.
Yeah, now, I'd like to just quickly discuss, we'll get all the serious questions out of the way. I would like to discuss the Good Samaritan that you speak of in many of your interviews, the man that you say saved your life.
Yeah.
Have you met him in person yet, or tried to find out who he is?
Alfred Douglas is a name that nobody heard about until I brought him up.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I'm saying that is because while the police were too busy taking credit for every single aspect of this, they didn't bother to mention Alfred one time. And that is an absolute disgrace, because there were two cops on the train that day. One of them did absolutely nothing. One of them did very little, and the other one did even less. And while the male cop, who I think I said this already, is a larger person than me, was having a hard time handcuffing Maxim Gelman, Alfred Douglas selflessly went and helped him handcuff him. And Alfred Douglas selflessly, again, came and rendered me medical attention. And Alfred Douglas is not a doctor. He's no more a doctor than you and I.
Yeah.
But Alfred Douglas went above and beyond that day on the level of law enforcement and a doctor. And it was very important for me to get that message out there, because the city of New York and the police department didn't seem to really want to give anyone any credit that day other than themselves. But Alfred Douglas is a key player in this saga, and I put it out there in all the interviews I did. I didn't know his name at all, and I just basically said there was a man on the train, and he helped me, and he did this and he did that, and I would love to meet him, and I would love to talk to him. And actually, the day that I went to give my testimony to the grand jury to indict Maxim Gelman, when I got out, there was a message on the phone from Alfred, and I wasn't sure I was going to remember him, honestly. So many things had gone on that day. I wasn't sure I was going to remember him. But then, as soon as I heard his voice in the message, he has, I think it's a Jamaican accent. And as soon as I heard his voice, every hair on my body stood up. I was like, that's him, you know. And we spoke a few times on the phone. And at the time, I was recovering. You know, I was at home. I was recovering. I really wasn't. You know, if the media wanted to talk to me, I was doing everything I could, but I wasn't about to hunt them down. And he had said that our ABC affiliate here, Channel 7, had mentioned to him that they might want to do something where we kind of meet each other for the first time, and they were going to capture it on camera, and, you know, et cetera. And I just said, look, you know, I'm kind of recovering here. I'll do whatever they want to do, just if you can kind of take the lead on this, if they get in touch with you. And then I hadn't heard back from him. So, you know, he knows how I feel about him, and I know that he's appreciative of the fact that every interview I do, I bring him up, because it was the one thing that he actually said to me. He goes, you know, I'm watching this and I'm reading this, and Alfred doesn't seem like the kind of guy that wants the attention either. But he goes, you know, nobody ever mentioned me. And I said, well, that was never going to be an issue with me, because I was going to mention you. And, you know, Alfred Douglas, man, that's my hero that day. I guarantee you. I'd say two things saved my life that day. One was Alfred Douglas, and one was MMA. So I will talk about Alfred, you know, till the cows come home. That to me is the hero of the day.
Now, you say MMA also saved your life. Now, did you practice MMA previous to this incident?
No.
No. So
not at all.
So just watching MMA made you do the single leg takedown, probably the most important leg takedown of your life.
Well, I mean, look, I can't say for sure, but what I can say is I've been an MMA fan since UFC 1. I got a phone call from my friend Dean the night before UFC 1, and he said, hey, did you hear about this tournament? This is a tournament, like all these disciplines are going to fight each other, find out who the baddest guy on the planet is. And I hadn't heard about it, but the next night I was there, ordered it on pay-per-view, and I was hooked just like a lot of other people. And since that UFC 1, I've watched as much MMA as I can. And I never wrestled in high school. I never wrestled in college. I would have never heard of a single leg takedown if it wasn't for MMA. I would have never, you know, thought to do anything maybe if it wasn't for MMA. I have no reason to know these particular maneuvers or moves if it wasn't for MMA. So, you know, it's not like I can go, well, you know, MMA saved my life, but I wrestled in high school. I knew what a single leg takedown was. I have no idea. You know, since then I've started training, but at the time, no, I had never taken a class. I had never done anything other than do what a lot of people do, and that's every month. And now maybe more than once a month, you plunk down your $50 and you get the UFC pay-per-view, and you sit there and you enjoy it, and you just take it all in, and that's really what I did, and that's it. So, you know, I know a lot of strides have been made recently as far as getting it legislated to have events here in New York, but, you know, to me, it's MMA saved my life. MMA and Alfred Douglas saved my life, and I'll scream it from the mountaintops. But, you know, as bad a rep as the sport gets, saved my life.
Yeah, that's crazy. Now, is MMA still, or hand-to-hand combat still illegal in New York?
No, you can do a lot of things here in New York. You can have kickboxing shows, you can have boxing shows, you can have wrestling tournaments. So you just can't have them all at once. You can't have every discipline all at once. So if you can do all those things, if you can kickbox, you can go kickbox, and you can have a kickboxing show. And if you can wrestle, you can go wrestle in a tournament. And if you know how to do, if you're a judo player, you can have a judo tournament. So you can basically do every aspect of MMA. But as of today, right now, you can't have a sanctioned MMA show in New York. But the last week or two, there's been a lot of positive movement in that. So hopefully it's not going to be too much longer.
Yeah, because I'm waiting to see the UFC event at MSG. That's what I'm waiting for sure.
Man, you know, it's a joke. It's a joke, and I'm not shitting on any other state or any other countries, but they're, for a while there, it looked like they might have UFC show in Russia before New York. I mean, or wherever. I mean, come on now. I don't, but a lot of people look at New York as the center of the universe. And I know there's a lot of politics involved as to why it's not here, but it's just bottom line, it's a joke. I mean, to me, especially now, MMA in New York is exploding. I mean, there's so many good young fighters coming out. We have a former champion in Matt Serra that hasn't officially retired yet, and it would be great to see him fight at Madison Square Garden, even if it's his last fight. I'd love to see him fight Matt Hughes, but he retired. But, the sport here, we have so many good fighters here on Long Island, like Chris Weidman and Costa Philippou, and Ali Quinta from Ultimate Fighter, John Vellante, Ryan LaFleur. I'm naming guys here, and I'm leaving guys out, but, even this Saturday, Dennis Bermudez is fighting in the UFC in California. I mean, the sport is so big here in New York right now. John Jones is from upstate.
Yeah.
There's just so many
big
fighters
names
associated with this state. It's insulting that we can't have a show here. And the reality is, the show in April in Newark, it's a 20-minute train ride from the city. There's going to be guys like John Vellante and Ali Quinta fighting on that, and they're local to here. But if you do a show at the Garden or Nassau Coliseum, you can really have half the card with Long Island fighters. There's that many talented guys here now. So we have some real good schools here on the island, and we have some real tough fighters. And forget about even this is just the island. You have Henzo Gracie's school in the city. I mean, there's just so much talent here that it's a disgrace that we can't have a show here yet. But I think hopefully in the next little while that's going to change.
Yeah, I hope so, because it is a great sport, and it's safe too. As silly as that sounds, I don't think there's been a death yet in the UFC, and they have the best doctors on hand, and they don't let it get out of hand, so I really don't see what the problem is.
Yeah.
But, I really hope that New York does get to see something like that, because I think it'd be an absolute cash cow, number one, and it would just be one hell of an event. Now, final thing here. There was this thing in Canada we had called the Bell Let's Talk campaign, which is raising mental health awareness. Now, there was no real evidence that Maxim Gelman had mental health issues, but of course, we assume that in order to kill 4 people and attack you, there must have been something wrong in his head. So what is your take on mental health and its awareness level?
Well, fortunately, Maxim Gelman was deemed sane enough to stand trial. Fortunately, he wasn't deemed insane, or else things might be a little bit different right now. I think Maxim Gelman just needed a great big hug or something.
Yeah.
But, I know a few people that are affected by mental illness, a few people very close to me, and I think that it is something that definitely needs to, I don't think it's possible to make people aware enough, and I think that a lot of times, I think people, if you can't see it, in other words, if you break your arm, you can see your arm is broken. You break your nose, you see your nose is broken. Things like that. It's a visual, and I think a lot of times with mental illness, it's not necessarily a visual. You could have symptoms of it, and maybe that's visual, or not act out, but you know what I'm trying to say. Act in a certain way that's a visual. But there are so many people that suffer from mental illness where there's no visible signs, and the fact is, it's something that you can't stress it enough. It needs to be addressed, and insurance companies need to treat mental illness like it's any other illness, and like I said, I think there was a stigma attached to it maybe 20, 30, 40 years ago, but now I think you'd be hard pressed to find anyone who doesn't know at least one person affected by mental illness, and you guys up there in Canada, you have a guy like Mauro Ranello that is on the forefront of helping people with this and trying to make people aware of it.
Absolutely.
And I think he does a great job. No, it's just something that, like, you can't do enough. You just can't. There are people out there, and they need help, and they have mental illness, and I don't know, like I said, I hope the insurance companies are treating it like it should be treated, but no, I really don't know how to end what I'm trying to say, but it's definitely something that needs to get as much attention as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's go away from all this reliving the bad moments in your life, and let's switch to some fun sports talk. Because you are, like we spoke before, a huge sports fan, and up in Canada, of course, we love our hockey.
Yeah.
Now, the New York Islanders is your team,
Yes.
and John Tavares, who's one
Is
of the
a stud.
stars,
Is a stud.
and he actually lives in the same neighborhood as I do.
Okay.
And he went to high school with a couple of my buddies when he was just coming up, and we saw him. He used to play 2 years older, and still absolutely ran show.
Of course.
So, what are your thoughts on the Islanders and the playoff hopes this season? Any playoff hopes?
Well, you mentioned John Tavares, and I'll tell anyone who listens, if John Tavares played for the Leafs, John Tavares played for the Rangers, at this point, if John Tavares played for the Penguins, he'd be on the cover of everything. John Tavares, the guy's a stud. I mean, the shame of it is that the Islanders don't get a lot of national broadcast games. So unless you live on the island or you live in New York or you live in the broadcast area, you actually don't get to see this guy play.
Mm-hmm.
And the guy is, to me, anyone listening to this right now, you can laugh at me all you want. John Tavares is at worst a top 10 player in this league.
Oh, easily.
At worst, he might be
Easily.
top 5.
I'd
Okay?
agree with that.
I said this the other night to my wife. John Tavares is, and I'm a big fight fan. I'm a big hockey fight fan. So I say this, and I'll say it like this. As far as players on the Islanders that I enjoy watching, as far as non-fighters go, I have not had, I call it an honor. I have not had the honor of watching a guy like John Tavares play for the Islanders since Pat LaFontaine.
Whew.
Okay? They've had plenty of people in between that have played the game and played, the sniper or the power forward role or whatever you want to categorize it,
Yep.
okay? I have not had as much fun watching a non-fighter on the Islanders since Pat LaFontaine, honestly. As far as the playoffs go, I mean, listen, that's a short season, you never know. I mean, they're playing, the other night they lost 7-0 on President's Day to the Flyers. It was an absolute disaster.
Yep.
And last night they went up to Ottawa and they played a little bit better. It depends. I think the decision the Islanders are going to have to make at some point is: are they a playoff team or are they a buyer or a seller? Because if they're going to sell, they definitely have some chips. They have Streit and they have Visnovsky and Nabokov, and they have a bunch of guys that you can get back some young guys. It's just it gets old after a while, always being the sellers.
Yeah, exactly.
I like the nucleus of this team. I
Matt
think,
Molson too.
Yeah, I mean they have a lot of underrated guys. Matt Molson's another guy you don't hear about outside the island.
Also from Mississauga too.
Yeah, you have a guy like Matt Martin, played up in Sarnia. To me, he's another Randy McKay. And the guy can play, he can fight, he can hit. There's a lot of good players on this team. Michael Grabner's the fastest guy in the league. Franz Nielsen, he's a great. He kills penalties. He does a lot of great things. I mean, they have some talent on this team, and man, I don't know. I don't know. You know what? The game has, to me, the game has deteriorated so much from when I was younger. I don't pay near as much attention to the rest of the league as I do to the Islanders. I watch some of the Ranger games because Aaron Ashham's a buddy of mine, and I enjoy watching him play. I'll catch a Bruin game every now and then to watch Sean Thornton, but I don't watch the other teams that much. Maybe the Flyers. I lived down there 10 years. The Flyers are an absolute first-class organization.
They love their hockey in Philly too.
And you know what? The brass of the Flyers, the front office, tremendous people down there. So I'm an Islander fan through and through. When they don't make the playoffs, I definitely root for the Flyers. And and to me, the Flyers play the game the right way. And there are very few teams, Flyers, Bruins, they play the game the right way. A few years ago, when the Islanders bulked up and they had Trevor Gillies and Konopka, guys like that. To me, those are hockey players. Those are guys that play the game physical like it's supposed to be played. And that was a fun year to be an Islander fan. Playoffs are not. I mean, listen, it's a short season. Islanders reel off 7-8 wins in a row. They're right back in it. But that goes for any team. I don't know. I don't know if they're a playoff team this year. I know they have a lot of young talent, and I enjoy watching them. I know a lot of the guys. I met a lot of them, and they're real good character guys. And you know what? There's a lot of guys in that room that are good kids. Kyle Oposo's getting a lot of heat here lately, but to me, he's a great kid. He's a big kid. He just needs to play bigger and play. I think he needs to play angry. But What do I know? I'm talking to you from my couch. He's an NHL player. So guys like Josh Bailey, I love watching these guys play. So, look, playoff team or not, I don't know. I just want to watch them, and I want them to give me 100%. And if they give me 100% and they lose, it's a lot easier to deal with than not giving 100%. And then the rest takes care of itself. So, to me, Islanders a playoff team. Gun to my head, I'm going to say yeah because I'm an optimist. Bottom line is, Rangers don't win the Cup, Penguins don't win the Cup. I'm cool.
Really, you don't like the New York Rangers, eh?
No.
Is that like a code out in New York? If you're an Islanders fan, you cannot by any means like the Rangers.
Well, you wouldn't want to, And you know what? And I respect a lot of their guys. I mean, like I said, I love Aaron Asham. I've known him since days in Fredericton. There are guys in the Rangers I enjoy watching. I love Ryan Callahan. I mean, that guy's a stud. I mean, that guy's a hockey player.
Yeah, he plays
Ryan
the game.
Callahan's a hockey player. He's like Mike Richards in L.A. And those guys are hockey players. They do everything. Like a guy in Jersey, David Clarkson. That guy's a stud too. These are not cherry pickers. These are guys that play every aspect of the game.
They grind out. They're grinders.
Right. Exactly. And I can watch a Ranger game and root against them, but watch a guy like Ryan Callahan play and appreciate it because he plays the game the right way. And the only time. No, I don't ever want them to win. I was going to say the only time I'd root for the Rangers is if they played a charity softball game against the Miami Dolphins or New England Patriots. Then I think I'd root for them. But
there it is.
But no, ultimately, if the Islanders are not in the playoffs and the Rangers in Pittsburgh are in the playoffs, the minute they're out is good for me. And I hate to say that because I love Ash, but I want them out.
Yeah, for sure.
So.
Now, let's just quickly speak on the style of gameplay in hockey, because like you said, I'm only 21 years old, so I wasn't obviously watching hockey when it was good. But one of my favorite players growing up was Wendell Clark.
Yeah, I knew you were going to say that.
All heart Wendell Clark, and he was the captain. He did everything. He was just Mr. Everything, like you said, a grinder. Now, is the game boring to you now? Is it too European? I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
I'm going to say it. I have to.
Well, let me say this. The other night on Twitter, there was a hashtag and it said, "Who would you like to meet?" or "I'd love to meet." And I put in Allison Chains because I would really like to meet Jerry Cantrell, Allison Chains. But someone I should have put in is someone who I would absolutely give my right arm to meet, and that's Don Cherry.
Oh.
I love Don Cherry. The guy's a legend to me.
And
if I could meet him, that would really be awesome.
I've actually met him 3 times.
Yeah, all right. So you know what I'm talking about.
He is the beauty of beauties.
If I'm a Don Cherry fan, obviously I like the physical game.
Yeah.
The game now, and I'm not. I think that's why I like guys like Aaron Asham and Matt Martin and Sean Thornton and guys that still play the game the right way. It's because to me that's what I grew up with. I grew up with the Islanders, and I grew up with Clark Gillies and Bob Nystrom and Gary Howitt. And, on the Rangers, they had Nick Patiu and grew up, I didn't hate the Flyers like a lot of Islander fans did back then. I admired them because they had their team, and every team had guys that played the right way. And then you get into the 80s, and every team has tough guys, and you just play it, and it was like kind of like, I mentioned Pat LaFontaine earlier. Pat LaFontaine was not a big guy, and Pat LaFontaine was by no means a fighter. But Pat LaFontaine, if you went after him, he'd go back at you. And I think that's part of the reason why at the time the Islanders got a guy like Ken Baumgartner was because Pat LaFontaine didn't want him to go back at guys, and he wasn't going back at them to fight them, but just like, hey, you're not going to push me around. So then they already have a guy like Mick Lakota, and now you get a guy like Ken Baumgartner, and all of a sudden you got these two guys watching him. And the first game that Baumer played was in Chicago, and I think it was Steve Thomas that went after Pat LaFontaine, and Baumgartner came in and took care of the situation. I just think back then you had guys that scored and did other things. You got any number of guys. I mean, Clark Gillies in the Hall of Fame. Cam Neely, Rick Tocchet. Guys, they did a lot of things. You go back, Danny Gare would fight. He could score. You just I'll wax poetic about these guys. You look at the Bruins back then and the Flyers, and St. Louis had a tough team. And it's just, to me, it was like it was a man's game back then. And you still have men that play the game now, and those are the guys that I admire. It to me, I'll give you a perfect example. I get into arguments all the time, not arguments but debates. Like here in New York, Rick Nash plays here. Rick Nash is an amazing player, but I don't consider Rick Nash a power forward because to me, a power forward is a guy like Wendell Clark. A power forward is a guy like Clark Gillies, a guy like Bob Probert, guys like Bobby Nystrom, and a guy like Brad May, and guys that did everything. You didn't have to be 6'5" and 230 pounds to be a power forward. Wendell Clark was a power forward because he did everything. And I'm not taking anything away from Rick Nash. I take him on the Islanders in a heartbeat. But those guys are not power forwards. I mean, Kevin Stevens, it used to drive me crazy. People called Kevin Stevens a power forward. I thought he was the biggest bluff in the league. He'd put up these ridiculous penalty minutes, and I thought it was an insult to call Kevin Stevens a power forward when he was on the same team with a guy like Rick Tocchet.
Yep.
So the game itself, and that's why I think a couple of years ago when the Islanders, they brought up Trevor Gillies and they got Kanopka and Matt Martin was young and Hamonic had played a few games and they were and Michael Haley played a few games for them. And that was a fun team to watch. And it was like every night something might have happened. And the night when they played Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh kind of ran all over them and that idiot Fleury was on the bench laughing after a fight they had. And then the next game, which ironically was the night before everything happened to me, the Islanders just beat them from pillar to post on the scoreboard and with their fists. And it was just an amazing game. I get goosebumps right now talking about it. The game is just different. And I guess Gary Bettman is more interested in the people in Iowa or, North Dakota. North Dakota is actually a big hockey state college-wise. But,
absolutely.
The pro game, where the pro game isn't. They want to appeal to those people as opposed to the rabid fans who grew up with it. I'm American. I'm not Canadian. I'm American. I'm a proud American. Hockey's in my blood. I grew up with it.
I love it. I love it.
But they're killing me with the game now. Honestly, they're killing me.
Now, just another question before we wrap up here. I have a Philadelphia Flyers jersey because my father is a diehard Philadelphia Flyers fan.
As is one of my sons.
And let me just drop a name for you here, and this is the name that is on the back of my my jersey, actually, and it's Dave Schultz.
Okay.
The Hammer.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Hammer?
He's an icon, man. I mean, that whole team was full of icons. I don't think he was the best fighter. Okay, he definitely knew how to play the role. His book is amazing, where you actually get inside his head. And, he talks about the fears that he had in doing the role and everything. But, you look at that team, you had Schultz and you had Kelly and
Bobby
you had
Clark.
Andre DuPont, Bobby Clark. I mean, they were badass. That team, hey, man.
I think the toothless smile from Bobby Clark says it all.
It's classic, him and the bomber from Flin Flon, I mean, honestly, I'm going to cry when I get off the phone with you because, talking about these old guys, these older guys, the way the game was played, I mean, the Flyers were an iconic team. I mean, they really changed the game, I mean, I guess we should give credit to maybe the Blues and the Bruins because it was because of them that the Flyers decided to bulk up and just get, just these guys on the team. But here's the other thing. You know what they don't want to talk about? These guys could play. Dave Schultz took a regular shift. So you want to talk about his 400 penalty minutes. You want to talk about Moose DuPont, being chippy and all these other guys. These guys played regular shifts, So I don't want to hear, people use the word goon. That's insulting. I mean, honestly, it's insulting. These are guys that took regular shifts, okay? So you want to talk about Dave Schultz, he had 400 penalty minutes. Yeah, but look, guy played a lot of minutes every night, and he fought for his teammates, and he played through injuries. All these guys did that. They had a maniac named Ben Wilson, who I love watching him fight. Okay? Guy played a regular shift on defense. Okay, so back in the day, in the 70s and the 80s, these guys who you look at as thugs and goons and everything, look at their time on the ice. They played a regular shift. One of the baddest dudes ever is Clark Gillies. He's in the Hall of Fame. So people can say what they want, but, the bottom line is this. The game now, it's still a great game. I mean, the crux of hockey is a great game, and it can be a great game. I just think it needs to be more physical, and I think what happens is, a guy like Matt Cook wants to play like he's 10 feet tall now. Matt Cook wouldn't survive a week back in the 70s and the 80s. He just wouldn't. It's just the way it is.
Can't get me started on him.
Well, that's what I'm saying. A guy like Matt Cook, he's the scourge of the league because he's a punk and he's a spot picker, but he wouldn't survive. He wouldn't have survived a week back then. There's no way. There's no way he would have survived. So, back then the men were weeded out. And if you wanted to play, you want to play like Matt Cook. I don't have a problem with that. But but answer the bell. You got a guy up there in Toronto who's a great hitter, Dion Phaneuf.
Yep.
Doesn't answer the bell. You want to play like that, play like that. But when you get challenged, drop the gloves.
Got it.
It's that simple. Just do it, and then that's it. I don't respect the enough because he doesn't answer the bell. You want to injure guys and you want to take cheap shots and borderline dirty hits. Fine. When you get challenged, you answer the bell. It's that simple.
Yeah, they had a player poll actually and said that Phaneuf was the most hated in the league actually by players.
Yeah, and you know what? I think he's a punk, but I don't mind. See, I'm all about eye for an eye. I'm all about putting the whistles away. You want to let a guy like Dion Phaneuf run around. You want to let a guy like Matt Cook run around. So be it. But let them police themselves. You know. And Phaneuf wants to take these cheap shots at people and these borderline dirty hits along the boards and everything. I have no problem with that. But when you go to injure someone and their heavyweight comes at you, don't punk out. Just be a man. You're man enough to hit the guy from behind. Now be man enough when a guy like Matt Karkner comes to beat the shit out of you.
Which is going to happen. And you know what? It's so true. And you have the exact same thoughts as I do because I played hockey growing up since I was 4 years old. And that's exactly how I played. I'm a pretty big guy. I'm not a very skilled player, but I love the hitting, love the contact, and love the game of hockey.
Yeah.
You speak passionately about it, which is very good because it is my sport.
No, it's in my blood, dude. Like I said, I grew up with it, and I grew up old school, and I'm still old school. And, people laugh at me and say, I got to kind of get with the times, but it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. If I wasn't as big a hockey fan as I am, it wouldn't bother me as much, but it does. And, that's why certain teams I can't watch. So, and that's probably not going to change.
Yep. Well, Joe, it was an absolute pleasure speaking with you about your story, of course, and hockey as well. It's just a great conversation. I had an enjoyable time speaking with you.
Oh, man, look, I appreciate that. Anyone that actually wants to sit here and talk to me about anything, I think you guys have rocks in your heads, but, I'll do it anytime. I just think I'm boring. So
not at all.
So I really appreciate the kind words. Hopefully anyone that's listening to this hasn't clicked off it yet, but hey, man, the honor was all mine, the pleasure was all mine, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Hey, man, no worries. Is there anything else you'd like to add? Any shout-outs before we wrap this thing up?
You know what? Yeah, you know what? Let me just acknowledge a few people, if you don't mind.
Love you
with
to.
Everything that happened. Keith Jardine has been very good to me. He got in touch with me after an article was written by Mike Chiappetta, and he just took it upon himself to call me. And a lot of guys have, but Jardine's my favorite. And, I'd like to thank him. I'd like to thank Dana White. I'd like to thank everybody at the UFC. I train here at a school called Belmar Kickboxing with, to me, the greatest striking coach in the world, a guy named Keith Trimble. Great guys that own the place, great guys that run the place. And I'm about to embark on training at Matt Serra's school, where my kids train right now, and Matt's been amazing to me. So, I know I'm leaving a bunch of people out, but, those are the people that I think about right away. But everybody who has helped me out, sent me a note, sent me a tweet, sent me an email, a text, thank you, everybody that follows me on Twitter, thank you. And I think that's about it.
Awesome. Well, like I said, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I know you don't like being called a hero, but you are.
Well,
and like I said, the pleasure is all mine.
Well, thank you, man. And no, the pleasure is mine, too.
All right, sounds good. We'll talk soon.
All right, see you, man.
All right, take her easy.
Bye now.
Bye. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, was Joe Lozito. I'm going to say I got to call him a hero because what he went through, none of us would ever think about going through in our entire lifetimes. And he's a stand-up guy with a great attitude, and it was an absolute pleasure speaking with him. Tune in next week.